Welcome to Forum 360 with its global outlook and local view. I'm Ardith Keck. We have lost much of our history in the United States due to buildings being torn down and replaced with other less historic buildings. Akron has suffered its fair share of this happening. There's an organization in Akron to try to prevent this from happening. The organization is called Progress Through Preservation. And with me are two guests to represent the organization. They've both been there through the years. Dana Noel is a past president and is now advocacy chair. Alice Christie is a retired professor from both the University of Akron and Malone University and has been involved with PTP for 20 years. The last 10 as program chair. She's hosted over 100 meetings regarding historic preservation. Tell me, what does an advocacy chair do, Dana?
Well, in this case, we advocate for historic buildings and places in Akron. It's our connection to our cultural heritage and past. And we just feel very importantly that we should, shine a light on these historic buildings and places and make sure that we can save as many of them as possible.
Okay, that goes into the mission statement, which Alice has.
Well, our mission statement, our actual full name is Progress Through Preservation of Greater Akron. But we actually are really focused on Summit County, the full county. And probably most of what we do is located in Akron, but we do venture out at times. And our purpose is to promote the preservation, restoration, and adaptive reuse of buildings, sites, and neighborhoods that are of historic importance.
Okay. And there's an organization in Cleveland that does just that. What about that, Dana?
Well, that's the Cleveland Restoration Society, and I've been a board member there for about 15 years as well. I actually was a board member there first, and then a friend of mine, Rosemary Raymond, who was on your show previously, I understand, introduced me to PTP and asked me to join, and that's my connection to PTP. And most of my business has been, my professional life has been as a contractor, and it's been mainly concerned with the adaptive reuse of historic buildings. So serving as a volunteer on these historic Cleveland, as in the case of the Cleveland Restoration Society, kind of goes hand in hand with that. And that's how I ended up here via Rosemary Raymond with PTP.
How long has PTP been in existence?
Well, just last year we celebrated our 40th anniversary. So that would make it 1984.
What is the history of the organization?
Well, the history of the organization, I would say, has been to exactly promote historic preservation. It was founded to counteract, or as a going back towards the wholesale tearing down, demolition of historic buildings in downtown Akron. And so this group of people decided that they would get together and advocate for saving some of the most historic buildings. Not every old building is something that has a cultural importance in a city, but some buildings do, and those are the buildings we want to focus on maintaining and restoring and reusing.
I think, to add to that, urban renewal was happening in the 60s and into the 70s, and as Alice indicated, it's just wholesale destruction of historic properties, not to mention ethnic neighborhoods that were displaced as a result. And it continued beyond just the urban renewal projects, and that was what kind of catalyzed this group of people to start Progress Through Preservation.
As I recall, and I am a member, as I recall, it was F. Eugene Smith, who is an architect, or was an architect, who started the organization.
I would say he played a major role. There was a group of people that got together and met in people's living rooms to discuss how do we move forward. And I think F. Eugene Smith and his wife Ramona played a major role. Mm-hmm. There were other people too. There was a University of Akron student named Michael Adams, and he was very much proactive. In, I think one of the things he did was read an opinion piece for the Beacon Journal that got a lot of press, got a lot of feedback, and maybe got people thinking.
We need more feedback, because when I said I was going to do a show on Progress Through Preservation, people were, what's that? Mm-hmm. So any advertising we can give you, I think is helpful.
I agree, and we appreciate it.
Good, good. You've got some successes and some failures. Let's talk about successes.
Well, the greatest success would probably be helping save the Civic Theater. And at the time, what I remember about that, and Alice will have some additional comments, but I remember that, well, one of the basic things about saving any building is that it needs to be sustainable. There are very few museum pieces. And even the Civic Theater, as iconic as it is, it had to have a sustainable future. And PTP was instrumental in generating the data points that supported the economy of having a theater like that in downtown Akron. And this is at the time before the internet, before information like that was so accessible. And it was done by hand, so to speak, and a very arduous task, but putting together, canvassing similar venues around the country and integrating, consolidating that information into data points that the Civic could use and help make a decision about.
And it's certainly been a success.
Huge success.
Yeah.
And to imagine what it would be like today if we didn't have the theater. I mean, that's the very heart of Akron in many ways. And to think of that being torn down, it's unthinkable to think about that as a loss of some sort. But so we're very fortunate. We were part of being being able to save that.
Thank heavens for PTP. And obviously, Stan Hewitt Hall was saved and not torn down, and I don't know if it was ever thought that it would be torn down, but does PTP plan on buying buildings to keep them from being torn down?
We discussed that, and there are other options and other ways to do it. Another one of our successes is the little schoolhouse, the 1870 schoolhouse on West Market Street, and that was very much in danger. But the city owns it, and PTP leases it from the city, and PTP restored it. And it looks fabulous, and it is now an event center that people can rent and have birthday parties or baby showers, and it is our headquarters. And that's another success that we really took the lead on in terms of restoring the building and saving it. So we don't own it, but we did restore it, and we do lease it from the city and use it.
Any other successes we should talk about?
I think the Kaiser Swain farmhouse is a good example. And that's to me, I really like that example because it's two citizen preservationists had the idea that this is a feature that should be saved. Cuyahoga Falls was going to create a park, and the plan was to tear down the farmhouse. And Sarah Dietrich and who was the other person? Beth Kinney, who are from Cuyahoga Falls, got together and started advocating for it. And it got some traction, and then ultimately came to PTP to become part of our organization and have support for for saving the building. And it ended up being saved. It's a great amenity to the park, and I think it's a wonderful example of just ordinary citizens getting a good idea for preservation and acting on it, and being successful.
And being successful, that's right.
I think another success was the Mustill store, the Mustill house and the Mustill store down on Lock 13 on the canal. And very historic building. It had been in private hands for 100 years. And it was in disrepair. I think there was still someone living in the house, but the store had been sort of abandoned. And that is a real success in terms of completely restored and used by the Canal Park Association. And
it's a museum,
essentially. It's a museum, right.
Another one that we advocated for and have had some success, but it's still very much at risk, is the old St. Paul's Church on Market Street. This was owned by the University of Akron, and it's an example of many different things, but it's an example of demolition by neglect, where the university had just had originally been used by the Ohio Ballet, but then that program was moved to a newer part of campus, and the building was empty. The utilities get shut off, the roof starts to leak, and it becomes in disrepair. So PTP stepped in, we advocated over a period of years, and then it actually caught on fire, and we continued our advocacy, and we brought it to the attention of Tony Tropey, and eventually it went to auction, and Tony ended up with it, and he has grand plans for it, but these things are often challenging, and he's in the midst of it, and it's still, I would consider it at risk, because he still hasn't, he's stabilized it, and it's safe and it's sound, but he still hasn't found an end user for it. And we continue to support him in that effort, and hope that in the near future we're going to see good things happening with that building.
Hopefully. With me are two members of Progress Through Preservation, and they have lots of history with the organization and have successfully worked to save some things. There are failures that I know some of the houses that were some of the rubber barons are not successes, but with me are Alice Christie, who is has been a program chair for 10 years, and with me also is Dana Noel, who is now advocacy chair and a past president of the organization. Is the city of Akron helpful in keeping old buildings?
That's a good question. They can be, but and this is one of the advocacy issues that we've been thinking about for the past year, and that is to actually help the city or encourage the city to create policies and protocols for these important historic buildings. Right now, I don't know that they have any of those, and more often than not, it's a private party or organization that cultivates the interests and motivates them to help save a building. One example now is Firestone Plant 1.
I know you've been working on that.
Yes, and it's a thankless task, really, in working with the city, because they want to tear it down, but there's still, we feel, a lot of opportunity there. And even though there are always difficult projects, ultimately, nobody has ever complained once a historic building has been restored and reactivated. So it's often well worth the effort. And there's a lot of incentives, financial incentives. The federal historic tax credit, there's a state historic tax credit. So in the case of Firestone, there could be as much as $20 million in tax credit equity that could come to that project. And there are very few projects that can generate that kind of equity. And it's not just any building. It's one of the iconic Akron buildings. And so when you ask me if the city has not tried as hard as they can or should to save this building. And they have the ability, and sometimes they have, but in this case they haven't.
And what's the status now?
The status is it's still being discussed. They haven't. They had an agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office to save the clock tower, which is it anchors that whole. It's a visual landmark, and it anchors that whole neighborhood of Firestone Park and South Akron. And they had agreed to save it at one point about a year ago, but now they want to tear it all down, and they're claiming that they can't afford to. And our advocacy effort is trying to educate them in realizing that they can afford to do it, and the cost is really based on bad information and not taking into consideration the adaptive reuse value of the building. So we don't know what'll happen, but we'll know in March, because that's when they get to the front building and the clock tower.
Well, good luck.
Yes, we need it.
I understand that West Market Street had tons of, maybe not tons, but lots of beautiful buildings. Mm-hmm. And there's still some left, but they've lost many of the houses that were there. East Market Street used to be the place to live, but it was abandoned. Why?
Oh, I can answer that. It was abandoned primarily because the rubber companies, when they built their factories, the prevailing winds blew the dust, the soot, and the smell towards the east. And so not only East Market Street, which had some amazingly beautiful residences, one after the other, but also Fir Hill, because after all the potential housing plots on East Market were used, they took a little bend and went up Fir Hill, which had just fabulous Victorian homes on it. But when the prevailing winds started to make that a less desirable neighborhood, everyone moved to West Market and the west side. And that's what led to the downfall of the east side of downtown, East Market and Fir Hill.
Okay. We have some glorious savings. Glendale Chapel, I understand, is one that was saved. Needs perseverance, courage, vision. Thomas Edison was supposedly married in a house up on the hill,
yes,
above the city. What about preserving that house?
That was Lewis Miller's house. And it overlooked downtown, but it also overlooked his factories, the International Harvester factories downtown. And that building is still there. It's a large red brick building. You can see it when you look up towards West Hill from downtown. It's clearly visible. It's now broken up into, I think, 12 or more apartments. I was in a couple of the interior spaces several years ago when Dave Lieberth made an agreement with the owner to let a few people in to see it. And it's really pretty well maintained inside. We went into a room that had been the library. It's now someone's living room in one of the apartments. It looks like it probably looked 100 years ago. So I don't believe that that home or that apartment building is any danger, in danger of demolition. But it's probably something that should be considered down the line as a historical museum, or given more precedence as a historical building in Akron.
Right.
That whole neighborhood is a cultural heritage spot, and I think it's very underappreciated in Akron. And one of our current initiatives is to restore the Glendale Steps. That was Mrs. Seiberling and the Akron Garden Club. That was their first commission after forming the Akron Garden Club with Warren Manning to create a beauty spot as you enter the cemetery. And the steps were then a connection from West Market to downtown. Steps are very, I think everybody in Akron knows Glendale Steps and Cadillac Hill behind it. And it's just very monumental and awesome when you stand there at the bottom, or if you're at the top and have the view. But it's not just Glendale Steps. It's the Glendale Cemetery. It's the Lewis Miller House on the opposite hill. It's all of the West Hill neighborhood, as a matter of fact, with the beautiful brick streets and the beautiful, turn-of-the-century homes that are there. And then, of course, my favorite, which I always have to mention, is the Krispy Kreme Donuts on Maple Street, which was like the second franchise in the country back in the 1940s.
Oh, I thought it was the first.
No, it was he was like a brother-in-law or something from the first one was in North Carolina. But how did it, I always wondered how it ended up in Akron, but that's the story. It was a relative. So we would really love to see, and St. Vincent's Church. So it's a very underappreciated historic neighborhood, and we'd like to reactivate that by restoring the Glendale Steps, which we nominated and got on the National Register of Historic Places about a year or two ago. We negotiated with the city, and this is where the city has been very helpful. They recognize this too, and we've negotiated a license agreement to go ahead and do the repairs. The city also owned a couple of vacant storefronts there, and they sold the one building, and they sold, both buildings have been sold. Akron Glass Works is going into the one, and then a bicycle shop is going into the other one, which you don't realize it, but there's the towpath goes right by there. And so I think that's an ideal place for a bicycle shop, and hopefully.
You mentioned the chapel at Glendale Cemetery, but all three of the buildings in Glendale Cemetery are on the National Register of Historic Places. And two of the buildings have received Summit County Architectural Heritage Awards. Just recently, and I think in the last year or last 2 years, the tower, the Memorial Tower, was completely restored and received an Architectural Heritage Award. And then previously, the chapel was completely restored. It's beautiful. But PTP co-sponsors the Architectural Heritage Awards with the Summit County Historical Society. And so in even-numbered years, we give out the awards. So this coming April, we'll be giving out the awards for the coming year. And then in odd number of years, we tour the previous year's winners.
And you have created, I think, a fundraiser for PTP that is unique and wonderful. We've done it every year.
Yes, it's called Dining in Akron History. And homeowners open their homes if they have a home of historic prevalence in the city, and we diners pay a fee to come and have dinner in that home. It's been hugely successful. This year, we hosted 99 people in 7 different homes, I think. So it's been very successful, and it is our primary fundraiser for the organization.
And you created it?
Yes.
Alice has many connections, wonderful connections in the community. And for 10 years, she was program chair and has just retired.
I'm stepping back
as program chair, and I'm not sure how anyone could replace her in that position, because the programs that you've done have been fabulous. We could continue talking for hours, I know, but we're out of time. I thank you, Dana, and I thank you, Alice, for joining us today.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.